All right. As promised, the ending of Elijah of Buxton. And I realized actually that I had only gotten in a little bit of these. I have 3 chapters left to go, actually. So where I left off with this is that we could see that Elijah had gone to the barn where they said that the preacher might be, and he found he found the preacher, but the preacher is no longer he's no longer alive, and he has found that there are people who are tied up against the wall in the barn because the slave catchers have caught them, and they're being held there until they can be brought back to their owners. Okay, so there is a woman who's holding a baby, and then there's there's 3 other people. The woman and her husband, and then another man, and then another boy that's been about Elijah's age, and he went and helped him all drink water, and it gave the baby some water and things like that. So he's talking mostly to the woman, and that's the part where we left off, right? Okay. So I asked the woman, "How many of them is it that's stealing you, ma'am?" Because remember, there's slave catchers who caught them. So he's asking how many there are. She said, "There's that one passed out yon, and one they call Prater and his 2 boys, and that ornery dog." I calculated real quick, swallowed hard, so there wouldn't be no backing down. And I said, "Ma'am, I can creep up on that man that's asleep and try to get the keys to those locks away without rousing him. And if he does wake up and I got to use this gun, then I got to use this gun. Then I'll let you all loose, and we'll have a shotgun too. And when those other slave hunters come running, we all could." Ideas were jumping at me hard and fast, and it seemed like the more harder and the more faster they came, the more they were bumping into one another, and the more confusing and worthless they were sounding, even to me. But I couldn't quit talking. Quitting talking was the same as quitting everything. And so I said, "And when we get up to Buxton, the folks will come welcome you and help you set up a farm. Even some of the white folks will help, and they're always looking out for people who are trying to get free. And when you get there, me and Cooter, we're going to ring the Liberty Bell about 100 times. That comes out to 20 times for each one of you. And don't no patty rollers come there, else they get tarred and feathered and run out of town on a rail. Or they'll disappear and they ain't never heard from no more. And even the white folk that don't want us there get mighty riled up when Americans come into Canada and try to tell them what to do. And once we get there, Emma Collins ain't gonna have to trick you out of the woods, because I'ma bring you all the way there myself." And I looked at the 4 other people who were back to leaning their heads twixt their knees and breathing in a way that they told me they weren't gonna run nowhere. They didn't look like a bunch of tired, beat down people no more. They were back to looking like 5 bundles thrown up against a stable wall. It was too much. Remember that the slaves are all tied up against the wall too with really thick chains. Okay? It was too much. Mr. Leroy dying, the preacher getting killed, the smells, the way the trains rattled, and the folks sitting there so scared and whooped and tired. It was just too much. The stupid and the confusing ideas quit coming, and they got their place took by a stinging in my eyes, and a loosening in my nose, and a choking in my throat. If it weren't nothing but some powerful fragileness, and when it comes, there ain't nothing you can do to stop it. It's like a ball got rolling downhill, so all I could do was cry. Same as the chained up runaway boy that was younger than me. I quit talking, covered my eyes, and cried. The woman switched her baby to her left hand and covered my mouth with her right one. She'd done it gentle, but her hand was rough as an old barn wood that was across my face. She said, "Now, child, you gotta settle down. You're gonna wake that white man. Then what's gonna happen to you? We can't be having no talk about you sneaking up on one of them while they're sleeping." you shoot that thing off, every white man or boy in the country will be here in no time. Besides, I see you's a proper raised child. You can't be having no murders resting on your soul. I sucked in some of the looseness of my nose and said, "But ma'am, how am I going to get you out of here? I know you're tired, but I got a horse outside that's the second fastest in all of Canada. And if we're careful, we can ride him hard. And maybe we can even borrow some of the horses there and no one would have to walk." And she laughed. My word, you sure is one bad little mister. First, you're going to take care of that white man that's sleeping there. And then you're going to help bust some slaves out of their chains. Then you're going to steal some horses? Why, child, with all the mischief you got planned, white folks going to have to get you as well as us too. She rubbed a rough hand across my hair. Boy, there ain't going to be no horse stealing, and there ain't going to be no more running. Can't you see we all run out? Besides, that man over yonder, he ain't got no keys. Massa Prada and the boys keep 'em, and they keep 'em all separated too. Then I remembered Mr. Taylor's knife. And I told her, "I have this!" And I reached into my tote sack and pulled out a knife. And I said, "It wouldn't make no noise if I just went over to that guy, the man over there, and took his shotgun." And she gave me a snatch and said, "Hesh, look at you. How tender as you are, how are you going to hurt anyone? I reckon you've never even cut the throat of a hog before." "No, ma'am, but I ain't never felt this way afore." "Well, you ain't gonna start. Now, how old is you?" "I'll be turning 12 in about 10 months, ma'am." 12 years old and free? And look at them proper clothes and shoes you wearing. And listen to the educated way you talking. It sure don't sound natural coming out of you, for you sound as educated as the Mrs. Children theyselves. I knowed soon as I seen you, you ain't never been no slave. With that and you peering out of thin air like you done, is why I wasn't sure if you was a haint or not. But how are we gonna get you free?" Elijah said. "You can't, child," said the woman. "But I got this knife. Maybe I can gouge those chains out of the wood that they're mounted in." I looked where the chains were joined up to the wall. It weren't wood at all. The chains came right out of the rock. She gave me another snatch and said, "Boy, stop. Them Patarolas ain't leaving nothing to chance. This ain't no amusement for them. This is how they live. This is what they do. If they don't know nothing else, they knows how to hold slaves and they know how to keep us held." I said, "But maybe if I pull the chains, I can—" I snatched at where the chains were put into the rock. "I can tug them free. Sometimes if you want something bad enough, your dreams get answered. Sometimes if you're scared enough, you get strong and you can do near anything." I pulled even harder on the chains and told her, "Everybody in Buxton knows about how Mr. and Mrs. Alexander were clearing stones out of a field by themselves and had them loaded up on a wagon. And he had to crawl underneath the wagon for something, and the wheel busted off and his leg was pinned, and there were no help around. And instead of having a fit, Mrs. Alexander got so afeared and mad that she picked up the whole end of the wagon herself so he could crawl out. A whole wagon full of stones, and she ain't nowhere near as strong as me." I pulled on those chains again, but it was like the chains were laughing at me. The woman reached down and held on to her ankle where the iron band was, and she said, "Honey, you gonna bust your leg afore you bust that rock. Don't you think if getting afeared and wishing something to happen would make it true, that these chains here would have turned to dust long ago? You think you wants to pull us free of these chains more than me and them Africans does? You think you got more strength and wanting in you than us? Than me? Child, you need to quit your agitating before you end up in shackles too. Some things just ain't meant to be changed." She was right. And soon as I knowed it, my legs quit working again, and I fell in a heap at her feet. She pulled me up and cradled her head in my arm. Sorry, she cradled my head in her arm. She wiped my eyes and said, Lord, if you ain't the swooniest thing I'd ever seen. She held my chin in her hand and said, Listen here, don't you be fretting for us. Stop this crying. You just riling that African boy up, honey. You don't want to make things no worse for him, do you? I hadn't thought of that. I was just being selfish. She said, You can't know it, but you the shiniest thing we've seen in a long, long, long time. Seeing you's the next best thing to seeing Canada. Seeing you shows me the whole thing ain't no dream. Her baby coughed again and she kissed it on the forehead. Then she kissed me on mine. She pushed me so she could look me right in the eye and said, Now, listen good. You got to get out of here but afore you go, there's the pistol you has. Is it real? It ain't no child's toy? No, ma'am, that's a real $100 gun. Do it work? Yes, ma'am. Do it got bullets? Yes, ma'am. Is it hard to shoot? No, ma'am, I saw the preacher shooting it and it has a kick. But if you're ready for it, it ain't much. But you gotta be strong. You ever shoot it afore? No, ma'am, but I shoot the preacher's other gun and it was about just the same. She smiled and said, Well, honey, I suppose if a little passing out freeborn thing like you can shoot a pistol, old Chloe can shoot it too. I looked at Miss Chloe's arms. They were thick, like twisted black rope. She grabbed my chin with her hand again, so I was looking right her in the eye and said, Let me hold that gun. I pulled the mystery pistol out of my tote sack and put it in her hand. She said, It sure is lighter than it looked. Now show me how it work. I showed her the same way the preacher had showed me, and she said, That all? Yes, ma'am. How long after you shoot it one time afore it's set to shoot again? It's a revolver, ma'am. Soon as you pull the trigger, it'll fire again. But you got to make sure you aim real careful and hold your breath before you fire the next time. And if I shoot a man one time, he gonna die? If you hit him in the head or the chest, ma'am, he's gonna die. And if he don't die right off, he soon will. And if he don't die soon, he's gonna spend the rest of his life wishing he had. Saying how many times does gun shoot afore it's through? That's a 6-shooter, ma'am. And she said, That'd be just perfect. My mind didn't do the totaling and counting in the baby, and there was 6 of them. Before I could ask her what she wanted to do, she grabbed my chin again and said, Now, child, you think you're gonna be shooting something with this here pistol afore you get back to Canada? No, ma'am, but she said, But nothing. Maybe it'd be best if I keep this gun. It weren't a question. I looked at the way it was rested easy in her hand and knowed I couldn't have it took back if I wanted to. And I said, Yes, ma'am, maybe that's the best. I wished I could do something more. I didn't see how they were gonna bust out of here with just that gun if they could get it off that wall. And she was right. Once that gun started shooting, all the folks in town would come running. And how far were they gonna get with then if they had just bust out? And what if she weren't going to use the gun to shoot the slavers? What if she was really going to use the gun to shoot? I couldn't even think about it. She set the pistol behind her and nodded over to where the preacher was and said, Afore you go, you tell me what that man you tell me what that man done yon over stole from you to make it worth y'all leaving Canada and coming down into this. I tried to look over at the preacher, but she pulled my face back to her. I told her everything that happened with Mr. Leroy and the preacher and Mrs. Holton's gold. She listened carefully and said, So now that your thief is done died, is you heading direct back to Canada? Or is there some other white man around here that you need to find? No, ma'am, I'm going right back. I got an examination in Latin, so I got to be at school on Monday. She looked at me hard and said, School? She said it again. School? I said, Yes, ma'am. And she took the longest time to say anything else. She closed her eyes and she squozed her baby. I'm going to stop here real quick because I think there are some parts in here so far that I wish that we were together to talk about. So it looks like he's having a conversation with Chloe, who's one woman in the of the slaves that has been caught, the one with the baby, the mom. And she's talking to Elijah. And Elijah was trying to think of every plan he could to free these slaves because he thought, they can't stay here. I have to do something. But then with her help, he realized that there was probably nothing he could do. And he started crying. And she was comforting him. And we find out too that now he has left his gun, or the preacher's gun, with Chloe, and he's not quite sure yet what's going to really happen with the gun. So and now she's talking about her baby. Okay. She took the longest time to say anything, and she just closed her eyes and squozed her baby. And after a while, she smiled and said, Here, come hold my child while I gets this shackle adjusted. I thinks all your tussling them just done bust one of them scabs open. I said, Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I was only trying to. She said, Hush, boy, my word. You sure do like the sound of your own mouth, don't you? Just be still and hold on to my child. I took the baby from her. It was a little girl. She said, I see you know how to hold a baby. Yes, ma'am. Some of the time I watch over the children in the nursery. The woman reached down with both hands and wiggled the iron around her ankle, then looked at me. And she seemed surprised and she said, oh, now that's truly amazing. I ain't never seen such a thing in my days. Why, look at how that child just let you hold on to her. Look how easy she be resting in your arms. Looky there. The baby looked up at me, and the woman acted like she wouldn't have been more surprised if she'd just seen Moses himself part the Red Sea. She said, I ain't never. Why, I believe that gal do love you, boy. I done spoilt her something terrible, and she don't let no one hold her without her hollering her life away. I do swear that baby love you. Why, I think she must believe you her brother. I ain't never seen such a thing my whole life. That child do feel some kind of kin, 'cause she ain't never let no one but me and Kamu hold her. She do, boy. Look at there. She really do love you. Tears were coming out of the woman's eyes, but she was still smiling. I looked down at the girl. She was a stringy, sickly thing. I didn't think she loved me at all. I thought the only reason she weren't crying was because even though she was being carried around and weren't walking up with no heavy chains on, she just looked just as beat and wore down and tired and whooped as her mom, pa, and then the other three Africans. But I couldn't figure why this woman kept saying that this girl loved me. She said, You sees it, don't you, boy? You sees what I'm saying? Then I did. I started seeing some of what was going on. This was some of that talk that grown folks do, where they're saying one thing out loud, but you're supposed to be hearing lots of other things at the same time. This woman was treating me like I was grown. She was acting like I could understand what she was meaning on the backside of her words. I tried hard as I could to see why she was pretending to me and that the little girl were related, like family. But nothing would come, doggone it all. This was just like one of them surprise examinations or tests Mr. Travis gives us in school. No matter how much you know on the subject, if he just starts asking all sorts of unexpected questions, your mind and brain just seizes up like a pump in winter. Even if I did know what this woman was saying, it weren't going to come to me now. It weren't going to come because of the surprise. I felt something terrible. She was wasting her time. I couldn't speak or understand this grown folk language. I couldn't think of nothing past how how to get these folks freed, and it looked like there was nothing I could do. And she tried again. She said, "Do you see how much she love you, boy?" And I told her, "Ma'am, I don't see nothing like." I reached the woman's baby back to her, and she looked at me hard. Her hands were shaking when she took the girl from me. We're going to stop right there.